The great lecture hall of the Galactic Academy was the largest room had ever seen. It was built inside a hollowed asteroid, and the ceiling stretched so high that clouds sometimes formed near the top. Today, over 3,000 students from different worlds sat in floating chairs that adjusted to fit their bodies. Some students had 4 legs. Some had none. Some floated in tanks of liquid because they could not breathe air. The academy accepted everyone. Sat in the back row where the human exchange students usually gathered, but today she was alone. The other humans from her group had classes on the other side of the asteroid. She did not mind. She liked watching the alien students. They were strange and wonderful, and she learned something new every day just by looking at them. Professor walked onto the stage. He was tall, almost 3 meters, and his body looked like a giant insect. He had 6 legs, 2 arms, and a head covered with large compound eyes that could see in every direction at once. His mouth had mandibles that clicked together when he was excited or nervous. Right now, they were clicking very fast. "Good morning, students," said. His voice came from a translator box on his chest because his real voice was too high for most species to hear. "Today we begin our study of dangerous feeding behaviors in the galaxy. This is important knowledge. Many of you will become diplomats, traders, or explorers. You will meet species very different from your own, and some of those species become very dangerous when they eat." The lights in the hall dimmed. A giant hologram appeared above the stage. It showed a planet covered with thick jungle. The camera zoomed down through the trees until it found a clearing. In the clearing stood a creature that made its blood feel cold. It was as big as a truck. It had scales like a lizard and teeth like knives. Its eyes were yellow and empty of anything except hunger. In its claws, it held another animal, smaller and clearly dead. The creature opened its mouth and began to tear into the flesh. Blood sprayed everywhere. The sounds of ripping and crunching filled the lecture hall. Many students screamed. The who were gentle plant eaters with soft blue skin covered their eyes. The tiny beings who looked like mice but walked upright ran for the exits. Even the granite folk from the heavy gravity worlds shifted in their seats with discomfort. "This," Professor announced, "is a Class 7 carnivore, the highest danger rating we give to any meat-eating species. Notice the complete loss of higher brain function during feeding. This creature cannot think while it eats. It only knows hunger and satisfaction. It will attack anything that comes near its food, including members of its own species." The hologram changed to show charts and diagrams. Explained how Class 7 carnivores had special chemicals in their brains that shut down their thinking when they smelled blood. He showed examples from 12 different planets. Each one was more terrifying than the last. Watched with interest but not fear. She had grown up watching nature documentaries on Earth. She had seen lions hunt zebras and sharks tear apart seals. The galaxy's predators were bigger and stranger, but they followed the same rules. Hunt, kill, eat. It was the way of nature everywhere. "Now," said, and his mandibles clicked nervously, "we must discuss a special case. When humans first made contact with the galactic community, our observation teams were sent to study them. What they found was deeply troubling." Sat up, she had not expected this. "Humans were initially classified as Class 7 carnivores," continued. "This classification was later revised, but the original footage remains in our archives as a warning." The hologram changed again. This time it showed Earth, recognized the coast of Korea immediately. The camera showed a restaurant by the sea with large windows overlooking the water. Inside, a group of humans sat around a table covered with plates. "Our observers recorded this meal," said. "Please prepare yourselves. What you are about to see is disturbing." The alien students leaned forward with fear in their eyes. Leaned forward too, but with confusion. The restaurant looked completely normal to her. She could see dishes she recognized from her childhood. There was nothing scary about it at all. On screen, a man picked up his chopsticks and lifted something from a plate. It was a piece of raw fish, pink and glistening. He put it in his mouth and chewed with obvious pleasure. The lecture hall exploded with panic. Students screamed as if they were being attacked. A fainted and had to be caught by her floating chair's safety field. The who had returned to their seats fled again, squeaking in terror. Even Professor stepped back from his own hologram. "The creature they consume is called salmon," said, his voice shaking. "It is a predator fish from Earth's waters, and they eat it raw, uncooked, with the blood still fresh." Stared at the chaos around her. She did not understand. It was just sashimi. Her grandmother made it every weekend when was a child. What was so frightening about that? The hologram continued. Now it showed a different dish. A plate with something moving on it. Tentacles writhing slowly, still alive despite being cut from the body. A woman picked up a piece with her chopsticks and put it in her mouth, smiling as she chewed. "That," said in horror, "is a predatory creature called octopus. The humans eat it while it still moves, while it still lives." Finally understood. To these aliens, humans looked like monsters. They saw her people eating raw predators and thought it was savage. They did not know about the culture, the history, the art behind the food. They only saw the blood and the movement and the raw flesh. She knew she had to say something. She raised her hand slowly into the air. Professor's compound eyes found her in the back row. His mandibles stopped clicking. The entire hall fell silent as every student turned to look at the human in seat 7042. "Yes, human," the professor asked carefully. "Do you wish to leave? I would understand if this footage disturbs you." Stood up, her heart beat fast, but her voice was calm. "No, Professor, I do not wish to leave. I wish to explain. May I?" The silence stretched long and heavy. 3,000 aliens waited to hear what the predator would say. Professor did not answer immediately. His compound eyes studied with a mix of fear and curiosity. In all his years of teaching, he had never had a Class 7 species in his classroom. The academy had allowed human exchange students only recently, and the rules were still being written. "You wish to explain," repeated slowly. "Explain what exactly?" "The footage," said. She remained standing, very aware that every eye in the room was on her. "You are showing my people eating, but you are not explaining why we eat this way. You are making us look like animals." A low murmur spread through the hall. Some students shifted away from as if she might attack them. Others leaned closer with growing interest. They peeked out from behind their seats, tiny ears twitching. His mandibles clicked twice. "Very well," he said. "You may speak, but please stay where you are. Some of our students are uncomfortable with sudden movements from your species." Almost laughed. She was one small woman, barely tall enough to reach the shelves in her kitchen. The idea that these aliens feared her was strange and a little bit sad, but she understood. Fear came from not knowing. She would help them know. "The food you showed is called sashimi," began. "It is raw fish prepared very carefully by trained professionals. We do not simply tear the fish apart like the creature in your first video. We cut it with precision. We arrange it beautifully. It is not about feeding. It is about art." "Art?" a student asked from the middle rows. Her voice was soft and trembling. "You call eating raw flesh art?" "Yes," said firmly. "In my culture, food is more than just energy for the body. It is a way to show love, respect, and skill. When my grandmother made sashimi, she spent hours selecting the perfect fish. She studied for 20 years to learn how to cut it properly. Each slice had to be exactly the same thickness. Each piece had to show the beauty of the fish." The hologram behind Professor still showed the restaurant. The humans on screen continued eating, unaware that their meal was being studied by thousands of frightened aliens. "But they eat predators," another student called out. This one was a granite folk, their voice like rocks grinding together. "The fish hunt other fish. They kill. How can you eat killers?" Nodded. This was a good question. On Earth, almost everything is a predator or prey, often both. Humans learned long ago that we were not the fastest or the strongest creatures on our planet. We could not outrun the big cats. We could not fight the bears with our bare hands, so we used our minds instead. She paused to let the translator catch up. Some species processed language slower than others. We learned to hunt the hunters, continued. We studied the predators, we found their weaknesses, and we killed them, but we did not do this for cruelty, we did it to survive, and once we survived, we learned something important. The flesh of predators has a different taste than the flesh of prey animals. It is stronger, more complex. We began to prefer it. Professor leaned forward. His fear was fading, replaced by academic interest. You developed a taste preference for predator flesh. How is this possible? Most species in the galaxy avoid eating predators because of the toxins that build up in their bodies. Humans are very resistant to toxins, said. We can eat things that would kill other species. Capsaicin, for example. It is a chemical that plants make to stop animals from eating them. It causes burning pain in most creatures. Humans put it in almost everything and call it delicious. Shocked silence followed this statement. A few students made notes on their tablets. Others just stared at with new understanding in their eyes. But the octopus, squeaked from behind a chair. It was still moving, still alive. That is cruel, yes. Shook her head. The octopus was not alive. Not really. The body dies when the head is removed, but the tentacles have their own simple nervous system. They can move for a short time after death. This movement is not life. It is just leftover electricity in the muscles. Then why eat it while it moves? They asked. Because it is challenging, admitted. The tentacles can stick to your throat if you do not chew properly. Some people have choked, but we are humans. We enjoy challenges. We enjoy a little danger with our meals. It makes the food more exciting. Professor made a sound that the translator could not process. It might have been disbelief. It might have been amazement. Was not sure. Let me understand, the professor said carefully. Humans deliberately eat predators, dangerous predators. You eat them raw to preserve the taste. And some of you eat creatures that are still moving because the challenge of not choking makes the meal more enjoyable. Yes, said simply, that is correct. The lecture hall was quiet for a long moment. Then a student raised a trembling hand. Are there other examples? Smiled. It was a small smile, but several nearby students flinched anyway. Human teeth were sharper than they expected. Many examples, said. We eat sharks. They are ocean predators with rows and rows of teeth. We eat crocodiles. They are ancient reptiles that can bite a person in half. We eat snakes that carry deadly poison in their fangs. We eat spiders in some countries. We eat fish that can kill with a single touch if not prepared correctly. She looked around the hall at the horrified faces. On Earth, said, we have a saying, if it moves, someone somewhere has tried to eat it, and probably made it into a recipe. Professor's mandibles clicked rapidly. He looked at his hologram, then at his students. The lesson he had planned was falling apart. He had wanted to teach fear and caution. Instead, he was learning that humans were far stranger than any predator he had ever studied. I think, the professor said slowly, that we need to continue this discussion. Human, would you be willing to provide more context for our class? Nodded. I would be honored, Professor, but I think showing is better than telling. Tomorrow I would like to give a demonstration. A demonstration? Asked nervously. Of what kind? Smile grew slightly wider. I am a culinary student, Professor. I came to this academy to share my culture's food with the galaxy. If you allow me, I will show your class how humans prepare predator flesh for eating. I promise it will be educational. The professor hesitated. His every instinct told him this was a bad idea, but his scientific curiosity was stronger than his fear. Very well, he said. Tomorrow, but please, human, try not to frighten my students too much. Bowed politely, a gesture from her homeland that meant respect. "I will do my best, Professor, but I cannot make any promises." The next day arrived at the lecture hall early. She carried a large metal case that she had kept in cold storage since leaving Earth. Inside was something precious, something she had been saving for a special occasion. The hall filled quickly. Word had spread across the academy about the human who would demonstrate predator consumption. Students came from classes that had nothing to do with xenobiology. Professors from other departments took seats in the back. Even the academy's security chief, a massive four-armed being named, stood near the exit with a worried expression. Set up her workspace on the stage. She laid out a wooden cutting board that her mother had given her. She unwrapped her knives from their protective cloth. They gleamed under the bright lights, sharp enough to cut through almost anything with ease. Professor stood to the side, his compound eyes following her every movement. "Human," he said quietly, "I must ask, those blades you carry, are they weapons?" Looked at her knives with fondness. "They can be used as weapons," she admitted. "But that is not their purpose. These are tools of my trade. My grandmother gave the long one to me when I finished my training. It has been in my family for 4 generations." "Your grandmother taught you to do this?" "Yes, she was one of the best sashimi chefs in our province. She learned from her mother, who learned from her mother before that. Preparing raw fish properly is a skill that takes many years to master. I started learning when I was 6 years old." His mandibles clicked softly. "Your culture trains children to handle predator flesh." "Of course," said. "Food is how we show love in my family. My grandmother showed love by feeding us the most delicious meals. I want to carry on her tradition." The last students took their seats. The hall held nearly 5,000 beings today, almost twice the normal attendance. Felt nervous but did not show it. A chef must always appear calm, her grandmother had taught her. The knife knows when you are afraid. Opened her metal case. Inside, packed in ice, was a large piece of deep red flesh. She lifted it carefully and placed it on the cutting board. The students closest to the stage gasped and pulled back. "This is bluefin tuna," announced. Her voice was steady and clear. "It is one of the largest predatory fish in Earth's oceans. A full-grown bluefin can weigh as much as 300 kilograms. They swim faster than most boats can travel. They hunt smaller fish with incredible precision." She held up the flesh so everyone could see. "This piece comes from the belly of the fish. It is called in my language. It is the most valuable part because it has the most fat. Fat gives flavor and a smooth feeling in the mouth." "How was the fish killed?" a brave student asked. Quickly said, "A good death is important. If the fish dies slowly or in fear, stress chemicals flood its body. These chemicals change the taste. They make the flesh tough and bitter, so we kill fast. One strike. The fish feels no pain." She picked up her long knife. The blade was almost 1/2 meter long and very thin. It caught the light as she held it up. "This knife is called a," explained. "It means willow blade in my language because it is shaped like a willow leaf. It has only one sharp edge. This is very important. With one edge, I can control exactly how the knife moves through the flesh. I can make cuts so precise that you can see through the fish." The students watched in tense silence as began to work. Her movements were slow and deliberate, almost like a dance. She held the fish with her left hand, fingers positioned carefully to guide the knife. Her right hand drew the blade through the flesh in long, smooth strokes. "The secret," said as she cut, "is to never push down. You let the knife do the work. One stroke from heel to tip. No sawing back and forth. If you saw, you damage the cells of the fish. The texture becomes wrong. The beauty is lost." Thin slices fell away from the main piece. Each one was exactly the same thickness, exactly the same shape. Arranged them on a clean white plate, overlapping like the petals of a flower. "See how the fat is distributed?" She held up the plate so the nearby students could observe. "Those white lines through the red flesh, that is the marbling. Good tuna has even marbling throughout. This tells us the fish was healthy and well fed. Professor moved closer, his fear apparently forgotten. The pattern is quite beautiful, he admitted, almost mathematical in its regularity. Nature is the best artist, agreed. I only reveal what was already there. She continued cutting. The pile of slices grew. Soon she had enough to fill 3 plates. Each plate was arranged differently, showing the fish from new angles, highlighting different aspects of its color and texture. Now, said, setting down her knife, I will explain why we eat this raw. She picked up a single slice and held it up to the light. The flesh was almost translucent at the edges, deep red in the center. Cooking changes food, she said. Heat breaks down proteins. It changes textures and flavors. Sometimes this is good. A cooked steak has flavors that raw beef does not have, but for some foods, cooking destroys what makes them special. She brought the slice closer to her face and breathed in deeply. Smell is very important. Fresh raw tuna smells like the ocean, clean and bright. If I cooked this, I would lose that smell. I would lose the delicate texture, the way the fat melts on my tongue. So you eat predators raw because cooking would ruin the taste? A student asked. Partly, said, but there is more. Eating raw food is also about trust. I trust the fisherman who caught this tuna to do it properly. I trust the shipper who kept it cold during the long journey. I trust myself to prepare it safely. This chain of trust connects me to many people I will never meet. She placed the slice in her mouth and chewed slowly, eyes closing with pleasure. When she swallowed, she smiled. And I trust the fish itself, she added. I trust that it lived a good life in the ocean, hunting and swimming free. Its strength and health became part of its flesh. When I eat it, I take some of that strength into myself. This is what my grandmother taught me. The hall was completely silent. 5,000 beings watched this small human woman consume predator flesh with an expression of pure peace on her face. This is not savagery, said quietly. This is respect. The fish died so I could live. The least I can do is appreciate what it gave me. She looked out at the crowd of aliens and saw something surprising. The fear was fading from their eyes. In its place was something new. Understanding. The questions came fast after finished her first demonstration. Students who had been too frightened to speak now raised their hands eagerly. The fear of the human predator had been replaced by fascination with the human artist. Do all humans prepare food this way? A granite folk asked, their heavy voice rumbling through the hall. No, admitted. Not all humans have the patience or the training. In my culture, becoming a sashimi master takes at least 10 years of study. You must learn to select fish, to understand seasons, to read the flesh with your eyes and fingers. Many people try and fail. What happens if you fail? The granite folk pressed. His expression became serious. People can die. Some fish contain poisons. Some bacteria grow in raw flesh that has not been kept cold enough. A careless chef can kill their customers. This is why we train so hard. This is why only the best are allowed to serve. A ripple of murmurs spread through the crowd. They whispered to each other in their squeaking language. They leaned close and spoke in low, worried tones. You mentioned poison fish, Professor said carefully. Can you explain more about this? Nodded. She reached into her case and pulled out a holographic projector, one of the few pieces of advanced technology she used in her kitchen. She activated it, and an image appeared above the stage. It showed a round fish with spots and a flat face, almost cute in appearance. This is fugu, said. In the galactic standard language, you might call it pufferfish. It is one of the most dangerous foods on Earth. Dangerous how? A student called out. Fugu contains a poison called tetrodotoxin. One fish has enough poison to kill 30 adult humans. There is no cure. If you eat the poison, your muscles stop working. You cannot move. You cannot breathe. But your mind stays awake. You feel everything as your body shuts down. The hall went very quiet. "Why would anyone eat such a thing?" Professor asked. His voice was barely above a whisper. "Because the flesh itself is not poisonous," explained. "The poison is only in certain organs: the liver, the ovaries, the skin. If a chef removes these parts perfectly, the remaining flesh is safe and delicious. But one mistake, one tiny cut in the wrong place, and the poison spreads through the meat." She changed the hologram to show a chef at work. The chef's movements were even more precise than had been. Every cut was made with extreme care. Every organ was removed whole and placed in a special container for safe disposal. In Japan, a country on Earth, chefs must train for 3 years before they are allowed to prepare fugu. They must pass a special test. The test includes preparing the fish and then eating it themselves. If they made any mistake, they die from their own cooking. "That is insane," a student said. There was no accusation in her voice, only wonder. Why would anyone take such a risk for food? Smiled. "Because the risk makes it valuable. Fugu is expensive because few chefs can prepare it. It is special because eating it means trusting your life to another person's skill. When you eat fugu with someone, you share something meaningful. You say to each other, 'I trust you with my life.'" She turned off the hologram and faced the crowd directly. "Humans are strange creatures," she continued. "We do not just eat to survive, we eat to celebrate, we eat to mourn, we eat to show love and respect and friendship. Every meal tells a story, every dish carries meaning." "But other species cook their food," Professor pointed out. "Cooking also has cultural meaning for many worlds." "Yes," agreed. "But how many species cook predators? How many eat creatures that could kill them? How many turn dangerous animals into beautiful art?" The professor had no answer. Picked up one of the plates she had prepared. She walked down from the stage and into the rows of floating seats. Students pulled back as she approached, then slowly relaxed when they saw she meant no harm. She stopped in front of the student who had fainted during the first lecture. The blue-skinned girl looked up with wide, nervous eyes. "What is your name?" asked gently. The girl whispered, "My name is." "Would you like to try a piece? I promise it is safe." His entire body trembled. She looked at the plate with its carefully arranged slices of tuna. The red flesh glistened under the lights. "I am herbivore," said. "My species does not eat meat." "That is okay," said. "I am not asking you to eat. I am asking if you want to try. There is a difference." Looked at the other students around her. Many of them watched with obvious curiosity. A few nodded encouragement. Slowly, reached out with a 3-fingered hand and picked up the smallest slice. She held it up to her face and smelled it. Her eyes widened with surprise. "It smells like the ocean," she said. "Clean, not like blood at all." "Try a tiny bite," suggested, "just enough to taste." Hesitated. Then, with visible courage, she placed the edge of the slice against her tongue. She held it there for a moment, analyzing. Then she chewed just once and swallowed. "It is smooth," said slowly. "Soft, not like I expected, not violent at all." Smiled warmly. "Food is not violent, only eating can be violent, and humans have learned to eat with grace." She returned to the stage, leaving the plate with. Other students leaned in, curious about the tuna. Saw offer tiny pieces to her neighbors. Some refused, some accepted. A few even smiled after tasting. "Professor," said, "I would like to make a request." The professor's mandibles clicked uncertainly. "What kind of request?" "I want to start a cooking club here at the academy. I want to teach students from all species about human food culture, not just the eating but the preparing, the philosophy, the art." "A cooking club," repeated, "with human food, with predator flesh." "With everything," said. "Humans eat more than predators. We eat vegetables from our gardens, grains from our fields, fruits from our trees. We have 10,000 years of cooking history. I want to share all of it." She looked out at the crowd of students. Many of them were nodding. The fear was almost completely gone now. In its place was something better, hunger, not for food but for knowledge. "What do you say, Professor?" asked. "Will you give me permission?" Professor looked at his students. He saw their interest. He saw their excitement. For the first time in his long teaching career, he had watched fear transform into understanding in a single afternoon. "I will speak to the Academy Council," he said finally, "but I believe they will agree. Human, you have given us much to think about." Bowed respectfully. "Thank you, Professor. I promise you will not regret this decision." She gathered her tools and packed them carefully back into their case. As she worked, she heard something she had not expected. Applause. Alien hands and claws and tentacles coming together to make noise. The universal sound of appreciation. Looked up and smiled at the crowd. For the first time since arriving at the academy, she felt like she truly belonged. 6 months passed after his demonstration in the lecture hall. In that time, everything changed. The Academy Council approved her cooking club after only 2 days of discussion. They gave her a large room near the student living quarters. They provided funding for equipment and ingredients. They even assigned a nutritionist to help adapt human recipes for species with different dietary needs. Named the club Earth Kitchen. On the first day, 20 students signed up. By the end of the first week, there were 200. By the end of the first month, there was a waiting list with over 1,000 names. Students came from every corner of the galaxy. Herbivores learned to appreciate the art of sashimi without eating it. Carnivores discovered that cooking could be as satisfying as raw consumption. Species that absorbed nutrients through their skin learned to enjoy the smells and textures of human food. Everyone found something to love. Professor became a regular visitor. He never ate any food since his species survived on electromagnetic radiation, but he loved to watch teach. He took notes on everything. He said he was writing a book about human food culture and its implications for galactic understanding. "You have changed the way I think about predators," told one evening after class. "I used to believe that eating meat meant giving in to animal instincts, but watching you I see something different. I see control. I see art. I see evolution in action." Was chopping vegetables for the next day's lesson. Her knife moved in quick, confident strokes. "Humans are not better than other predators," she said modestly. "We just learn to express our nature differently." "That is precisely what makes you remarkable," replied. "Most species try to suppress their instincts as they become civilized. Humans have found a way to celebrate them instead." The news of Earth Kitchen spread beyond the academy. Journalists from other worlds came to write stories about the human chef who taught aliens to appreciate raw fish. Diplomats visited to learn about human food traditions. Even a few wealthy collectors offered to buy his grandmother's knife for enormous amounts of money. She refused them all. Then came the official announcement from the Galactic Council of Species Classification. Was teaching a class on proper knife technique when Professor rushed in. His mandibles were clicking so fast that his translator could barely keep up. "Human," he called out, "you must come see this. The Council has released their new report on human classification." Set down her knife and followed the professor to the Academy's main communication center. A crowd had already gathered around the large display screen. Students and professors from dozens of species stood shoulder to shoulder, all staring at the words scrolling across the screen. The report was long and technical, full of scientific terms and careful reasoning, but the conclusion was clear. Humans have been removed from the Class 7 Carnivore designation, the report stated. After extensive review of new evidence, including cultural documentation provided by the Galactic Academy of Studies, we have determined that humans represent a unique case in galactic biology. Felt her heart beating faster as she read on. Human predatory behavior differs fundamentally from all other known carnivorous species. While humans possess the biological characteristics of apex predators, They have developed cultural controls that prevent feeding-related aggression. Furthermore, they have transformed the consumption of predator species into a sophisticated art form with deep spiritual and social significance. The next paragraph made eyes fill with tears. A new classification has been created for the human species, Class Omega. This designation recognizes their unique position as predators who have achieved complete cognitive control over their feeding behaviors. Class Omega species are considered safe for all diplomatic and social interactions involving food. The crowd around erupted in cheers. Students who had once feared her now rushed forward to offer congratulations. His mandibles clicked with pure joy. Even the four-armed security chief allowed himself a small smile. But the report was not finished. Additionally, it continued, the Council recommends that human culinary traditions be studied and preserved as an example of beneficial predatory culture. The human practice of eating dangerous prey species with respect and artistry offers valuable lessons for developing carnivore civilizations throughout the galaxy. Someone in the crowd shouted a question that everyone was thinking. Does this mean humans can finally eat at diplomatic dinners? Laughed, it was a bright, happy sound that made the aliens around her relax. Yes, she said, I believe it does. That evening, returned to her quarters and called her mother on Earth. The connection took several minutes to establish across the vast distance, but finally her mother's face appeared on the screen. Said, using the Korean word for mother, the galaxy has accepted us, they understand now. Her mother smiled. It was the same warm smile that remembered from childhood, from long afternoons in the kitchen learning to cook. Your grandmother would be proud, her mother said. You have done what diplomats and soldiers could not. You taught them who we really are. Nodded, feeling the weight of the moment. I just showed them the truth. Humans are predators, yes, but we are also artists. We are also philosophers. We eat the hunters, but we do it with love. Her mother laughed. Now you sound like your grandmother. She always said the same thing. She was wise, said softly. She knew that food connects everyone, even aliens who eat nothing but starlight. After the call ended, sat alone in her room for a long time. She thought about the journey that had brought her here. A small girl learning to cut fish in a kitchen by the sea. A young woman traveling across the stars to share her culture. And now, somehow, a symbol for her entire species. She pulled out her grandmother's knife and held it up to the light. The blade gleamed, perfect and sharp, just as it had for generations. We did it, grandmother whispered. They understand now. They know that eating is not just survival, it is art. It is love. It is what makes us human. Outside her window, the stars burned bright against the darkness of space. Somewhere out there, on 1,000 different worlds, beings of every shape and size were learning to see humans differently. Not as monsters, not as predators, but as artists who had mastered the oldest art of all. The art of the meal. Smiled to herself and began to plan tomorrow's lesson. There was still so much to teach, and the galaxy was hungry to learn.